Come on, baby. We are back. We got another great episode with an incredible guest. My man, Shaun Peet in the house, NASCAR pit crew coach and chief kindness officer of Trackhouse Racing, and also the author of the book, 12-Second Culture. Shaun, welcome to the show, my man.
Jake, thrilled to be here with you, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Dude, so I was fired up that we got this scheduled because for everyone that's listening, I heard Shaun speak. He came to my mastermind, delivered a keynote, and just lit the room on fire. And I'll be honest, when people give keynotes, I put the guard up high because I'm a speaker, and so my level of what's going to be good is raised. And when Shaun started speaking, the guy just delivered. Okay. He delivered. He had great tone. He had great messaging. He had great storytelling. And so, where I'd love to start right here is how have you been able to speak while also being a NASCAR pit crew coach and also building out an entire entity?
Yeah, Jake, honestly, completely by accident. I was sent up to Indianapolis to speak at the NFL Combine simply because our company had a big footprint up there. And, I'm not a public speaker. So I went up there, did 30 minutes, and I thought it was awful. But afterwards, a bunch of the teams hung around, Kansas City, the Texans, the Saints, and we were invited out to Kansas City. And then we were leaving the convention hall, and this guy tracks us down the hallway and it says, "Hey guys, look, I took more notes in your 30 minutes than I did the first 2 days of this conference." And we get into this really great back and forth. And at the end of it, I'm like, "Well, cool, man. Who are you with?" And he goes, "I'm with the New England Patriots." And it was the validation point. When you work in NASCAR, no one thinks you just don't think you have anything in the world wants to hear. But it was a big enough validation point that it was like, you know what? Maybe we do have some wisdom, and maybe that wisdom needs to go into a book.
Yeah. Yeah. And so as that happens, so you do the speech at the combine, and then you're like, wait, you got something here. So did the book come right after that? Or what was the process for you that led itself to being like, oh shit, I got something here?
Yeah, I think we realized that, and then we started trying to figure out, well, how do you do that? And we wrote the book some time ago before COVID. We didn't know where to go, and so we spent way too much time like looking. Finally, ran into a guy who was a ghostwriter, and we started throwing this idea around. He's like, "Well, let's just talk," and we started the whole book process. And the one thing about books in this country is if you have a book, it makes you an expert, regardless if you're an expert or not. And it creates its own validation point to companies and the places we have went. And since we've written that book, I laughingly tell people all the time, ever since we wrote the book, every day I'm somewhere between overconfidence and self-crushing imposter syndrome, because some of the rooms it's taken us into, it's just like, really? Like, you're sure? You sure? But
Yeah.
it's been fantastic, man.
Dude, okay, so let's go a little bit of the backstory here because I think one of the things that makes you so unique and so powerful is what you've been able to do outside of just, writing a great book, building some great stuff. Talk to me about the adventure in NASCAR and why, like, because I'm not a NASCAR guy and I wasn't before I heard you speak. And you really enlightened me that the power of time, really understanding how teamwork works and culture works and how it can be the difference. What like milliseconds or seconds make millions of dollars difference in your line of work. So can you walk us through so everyone knows and understands what type of person you are and kind of where you come from when it comes to this?
Yeah, sure. So I wasn't a NASCAR person either. I grew up on Vancouver Island, came to the United States, played hockey in the Ivy League at Dartmouth, and then started out on a minor league journey. Wasn't interested in going to Wall Street and doing all that stuff, and accidentally stumbled into NASCAR and was a guy who was on a pit crew for years and then had the opportunity to coach. Simply because I thought I could do it a different way, and that way was that I wanted to value people. And so I actually got an opportunity to basically take over the worst pit crew department in NASCAR. And I was given half the budget to fix it. And in 8 short years, turned it into the best pit crew department in NASCAR. Won our sports award for the Mechanics Award for fastest pit crew in the sport. And it was all about how you inspire human brilliance. I laughingly refer to our department as the department of unrealistic expectations. Because for those that that don't know about a NASCAR pit crew, My job is to train 5 athletes to change 4 tires and put 2 cans of fuel in a race car in 8 seconds now. And, so we work in tenths and 2/10 of a second. And like I tell people, if I asked you what is 2/10 of a second, if you went and blink your eyes, that's about 2/10 of a second. In our world, 2/10 of a second equates to about $1.1 million. Like, these cars are moving at 190 feet per second. So 2/10 of a second equates to 56 feet. 56 feet at the Daytona 500 is the difference between first and sixth. Difference in prize money is $1.1 million. So when we talk about like studying time, that's what we do on the daily.
Dude, this shit fires me up for two reasons. One, as a competitor, I love it. But two, I'm a math nerd. Like, I love all the math there. So I'm just like computating everything and computing everything. And I'm like, yes, yes, my man. So that fires me up. I got to ask a question though, because I think something that's really unique. Okay. And I may be off base here. And if I am, please let me know. But when I think of NASCAR, I think of it as a very masculine industry, right? Very masculine, very traditional industry that probably wasn't as open to change as some other industries have been. How have you been able to dance in the very masculine industry of NASCAR and race car driving with being a chief kindness officer and valuing really the people?
Yeah, I think it started with results, right? I came in and immediately, Mike Metcalf and I created results for this team. And I think anytime you have early success, you get more rope, right? More rope to hang yourself with. And when we started building this team, all we did was we hung our hat on two things. We wanted kids that would put more sweat on the floor than anyone in NASCAR, and we put nothing above being a world-class human being. Okay, that was our recruiting criteria. So we go out, we build this team, and this team is the most diverse pit crew in the history of NASCAR, in the history of our sport. No team has ever looked like ours. We have a female French soccer player, left Paris to play soccer at West Virginia. So imagine that for a second. You have someone who left Paris to go to Morgantown, West Virginia. Like that shows us you got some grit. So what was my methodology? My methodology was always to inspire, right? It's always to meet people and leave them inspired. If that doesn't work, I try to educate them. Okay. If that doesn't work, I try to embarrass them. And if that doesn't work, honestly, Jake, my last straw is I threaten them with violence. And that's that's been the MO to get it over the finish line. So fortunately, I haven't had to do the last part too many times, but it's still slow to turn around, but it is turning.
Yeah, and you talk about like really being able to understand and build the right culture with the right people. How do you know? Okay, you gave a little criteria there. How do you know though if someone's got the secret sauce? And how long does it take you to identify that from the minute you see them or start to interact with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we got very intentional about how we curated our first day experience with someone. So like, our competitors are recruiting the SEC and the Big Ten. Anyone in the country can come to Trackhouse Racing. Okay. But what we did is we built the first day, and what we did is we hid the behaviors we wanted to see inside the day's events. So if you're coming to Trackhouse, Jake, I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to need you there at 7. Okay. If you show up at 6:30, you get a check mark and you move on. If you show up at 7, you're gone. Okay. Now you're going to watch 2.5 hours of NASCAR pit crew practice. And as you can imagine, there's dirty wheels, greasy tires. Okay. If you pick up a rag and jump into that work unprompted, it shows me that you're an owner, or you have an owner's mentality, and you get a check mark and you move on. If you don't, you're gone. Okay. Now Thursday is by far the hardest workout of the week. It's a nightmare. And I don't ask you to lift the most weight or jump the highest. I want to see if you can get through it, because intestinal fortitude for us is something we have to have in our athletes. We actually had a kid throw up in the middle of it, come back, finish, and he thought he was done, and we loved it, right? Spoke volumes about the kid. So now imagine this. You've been on campus for about 3.5 hours. You're exhausted from the workout. I have 26 alpha males and an alpha female, and I'm just going to tap you on the shoulder and be like, hey, Jake, break the group up for me, please. So now you have to bring in everyone's hands into the middle and say something to these 27 people that inspires them. Shows me how you handle pressure. All right, if that goes well, we're going to send you to lunch. Okay, you're going to go with 5 or 6 of our athletes, and they're just going to chop it up with you. and they're going to come back and tell me, hey, this is a go or this is a no go, because they're the people that are going to spend the most time with this person. Okay, if you get the sign off on that, the last thing you're going to do is you're going to come into office and you're going to sit with me. Before you come into that office, I'm going to do one of two things. I'm either going to ball up a piece of paper and put it right on the door jamb, so that when you come into the office, you have two choices. You can step over it, or you can pick it up and throw it in the trash. Or I'm going to have more boxes than I can carry. And I'll be like, Jake, sorry, I know our meeting's at 1 o'clock. I just got to run these up to HR. And it's very interesting to see if you hop in and decide to carry the 3 boxes that I just can't carry. And that speaks volumes, right? Like Dave Ramsey says all the time, even a donkey can look like a thoroughbred for the first 2 interviews. And when we get people through the door, they're giving the best version of themselves.
Yep.
I don't want the best version of them. I want the real version of them. So by doing this, it's led to a lot of success. Every time we've deviated, or ignored one of them, we've paid for it. And, because the thing is like, I'll get a linebacker from Georgia and, he looks the part and I'm like, man, I hope this kid makes it. And if he doesn't pick up a rag and clean the tires, he's gone. I don't care if he led the SEC in tackles. He's not one of our people.
When you're going through this, okay, you say every time you've deviated, it hasn't worked out. You probably also haven't had this regimented since the beginning, right?
Yeah, you're right. Like we are constantly working on it, right? I bet you this is our 10th or 12th iteration of this, right? Like we literally just added like a phone call the night before. So that way our first impression of the person isn't with our eyes. And I think, so anytime we hear of another company doing something well and we think we can add it and make our process better, we're doing it.
See, that's really interesting to me. What happens because now you're speaking a lot more, right? You're getting out there. People are starting to hear what you got going on. What happens when people start to hear some of the first day experience stuff that you do and they're prepped for it? What are going to be some of the other things that you look for beyond, hey, you did the things we expect to get you there? What then is it about the person that makes them become part of the team?
What separates the ones that really do it, I think, is the desire to compete.
Yeah.
When we talk, there's a story about 2 Navy SEALs we had, and those guys were relentless in their pursuit of it. Their first thing in the morning, there when we're turning the lights off, right? And something we talk about in our program all the time is success doesn't reward the wrong person. And these just their willingness to get through it, right? Mike Tomlin says all the time, this life is not about what we're able to do, it's about what we're willing to do. And that's what I mean. What's so interesting, Jake, is I have a kid that won the Super Bowl with the Denver Broncos as a cornerback. I have a kid that was cut from his 9th grade JV baseball team. So the only thing that unites them, the only common thread amongst all of them is their willingness to do what other people aren't willing to do. And that's to put in thousands of hours to perfect a skill.
Do you think it's more important to be willing to learn the skill or to have a baseline understanding of the skill?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's most important to be lit up by the skill. Like where it's something that gets you out of bed, because what is demanded of you, you're going to need that. Because like I said, I think, it's funny. We'll have a lot of guys just watch film and get a little bit better. I have another guy that the second, he messes up, he'll watch film for a second to identify what's wrong. And then he'll spend hours in the truck bay hitting lug nuts to try to rectify the problem. So it's those people that own that and really go after it that we're successful with.
See, I'm fascinated by this because, my first job out of school was working with the Lakers. And I was on the corporate partnership side, but I had a lot of opportunity to watch the greats. I had a chance to watch Kobe in his final NBA season. And I didn't get to, hang out with him a bunch or anything, but there were things that I noticed about him that made him different than everybody else. And it was about the routine. It was about the fundamentals. It was about just that pure desire. This is what we're talking about. The desire to win, the desire to compete, right? You look at the moments of what makes Kobe Kobe, and it's not just, oh, he scored 30 points a game. It's he scored 30 points a game while locking the defender up and getting the W. It was while hitting the shot, while leading the team. And so I think it's so important for everyone to recognize here, whether you're an entrepreneur who's trying to grow their business to the next level, whether you're a author trying to get through this and overcome that self-doubt and that limiting belief. It's like, if you want it bad enough, there is a way, but you have to be lit up, like you said, by the opportunity that is in front of you and see it just as that versus something that could cripple you or something that could go wrong. And you talk about this concept, prove people right. I think this is a great segue into this. Okay.
Sure.
Talk me through where you kind of live by this philosophy, because I think that so many people, when they face doubt, when they face uncertainty, they kind of crumble or they never reach what they're capable of. They let the doubters and the haters cripple them and they stop from what's possible. So, what is this prove people right mentality that you talk about in your book, that you talk about when you speak and everything?
Yeah, I think, I think what it starts with is it starts with a fear of other people's opinions, right? And there's no greater restrictor of human potential than the fear of other people's opinions, right?
Yeah.
Like so many of us succumb to self-limiting beliefs, and they're usually formed from other people's opinions of us, and it affects how far we rise, right? We are all born to shine, right? But we go through life and it's like a death by a thousand cuts because we focus on the wrong thing, right? Sure, we have all of us have our critics and our detractors, but they're not as numerous as the people cheering us on, right? So when I say prove people right, if I ask people, have you ever proved someone wrong? Almost everyone has, right? But what everyone hasn't done is ask themselves, when do you get to do that, right? And when you think about it, you get to prove somebody wrong at some great moment of your life, right? Whether that's a championship or, I won the championship. I'm proved that coach wrong because he never believed in me. Or I got this scholarship, or I built this business and that person, So what they're doing is they're bringing this person into this wonderful event in their life. And I talk about, think about that for a second. Like, think about another wonderful event in your life. Right now, in that wonderful event, invite someone in who stabbed you in the back, who lied about you, and who never believed in you. And it changes the feeling of that event, right? That's what you do when you prove people wrong. What if instead we prove people right? Right? We all have people in our lives that have poured their time and their love and their respect into us, right? Whether that's parents, grandparents, teachers, coworkers, right? We have a bleacher full of those people. What if we did it for them? And I think it's a way of lightening yourself and unburdening yourself of these people that don't and have never belonged in your life in the first place. And it's a lot easier and lighter way to go through life.
I know there's plenty of studies about this, related to the way our brains react to negative comments versus positive comments and the correlation, right, of how many of each you pay attention to. Without the studies, without the statistics, but just from your personal experience related to this concept, why do you think we're so caught up on when somebody says one negative thing, whether that's one negative review of your book, whether that's one person who's like, no, your idea is not good enough, your dream's too big enough. Why are those the singularities? Why are those the things that get 90% of our attention when there are those people who want us to succeed, and there's so many more people who are rooting you on than rooting against you, but we never pay attention to them? Why?
Yeah, I mean, it speaks all the way back to our tribal biology, right? And that ratio is 5-1, right? It behooved us to know that there was a saber-toothed tiger in that cage, right? But what it's happened now with as much information that moves through the world, it's become a maladaptive trait that
Mm.
literally cripples us if we allow it, right? The thing is we all have autonomy in writing our own story, right? But if you're going to allow the fear of other people's opinions of you and all this other thing stop you, right? I love this. There's a quote I read recently. It said, God is not going to have his work made manifest by cowards, right? You're born to shine, but that doesn't mean it's going to be easy getting there, right? And I hear people all the time being like, well, and people write books. Well, it's too hard. And do you know what the most important question in the world is, Jay? It's
Which
compared
one?
to what? It's compared to what? And so, you can, is it hard? I had guys complaining about going to pit practice the other day because it was cold outside. And I said, hold on a second. This sucks doing this today compared to what? Compared to digging a ditch in Charlotte for $14 an hour? Does it suck compared to that? Does it suck compared to hearing your wife just get diagnosed with breast cancer? Like what's crazy in this world is with all the social and all the things that are going on, we're in a 24/7 comparison game. And
Yeah.
in human nature, all we ever do is compare up. But if we just compared back for 1 second, we would realize most of us are blessed beyond measure, right? And that's just it. So what do I tell people? Ask yourself that question. So if everything in the world is hard, then we stop asking the question, is it hard? And we start asking ourselves the question, is it worth it? And
Mm,
oftentimes the answer to that question is yes, it is.
mm. What do you think are the biggest? I can go on and on about this. What do you think are the biggest emphasis, right? The biggest reasons, the biggest purposes that people find something that's worth it, right? Because it's hard, yes. And you're saying, is it worth it? What have you found to be those driving forces, those emphatic yeses that make something worth it and the reasons behind them?
Yeah, again, I think the biggest thing is if you believe in it, right? I think you and I were talking before we started this, authenticity sells, but authenticity is also rooted in our primal biology, right? To be truly happy, there's a thing called self-determination theory, and it puts forth that you only need three things in your life to truly be happy, and that's to be competent at what you do, connected to others, and authentic in your life. And I think if you find something that aligns with those three things and you get the ball rolling, um, man, you have a really good opportunity to be successful. But what
Yeah.
happens is a lot of us get thrown off the path, whether it's other people's opinions or we feel society wants us to do this. You know, one of the most illuminating events of my life was my first week at Dartmouth College. And I came from a lower middle socioeconomic family. My dad's a mechanic, my mom's an esthetician. And you go to school at Dartmouth, you're on campus with some of the richest kids in the country. And when I got there, Jake, they had all the clothes, all the shoes, all the trips, all the cars that I was told I'm supposed to want my entire life. And the one thing that struck me was most of them were inherently miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't grow up rich, but we had a richness of life. I had really great parents. And it changed me. I'm like, well, clearly money's not the answer. Right. So instead of going to Wall Street out of college, I went to the Texas Hockey League for $350 a week. And at that point, my remember it clearly, I made a promise to myself that I would chase joy because I figured that if I went out there and I did things that lit me up, I would be good at them. And if I was good at something, someone was going to compensate me for it. And I never in a million years thought I would be in NASCAR. Right. But I'm 49 years old and I feel like I've never worked a day in my life. And I wouldn't trade it with anybody.
Dude, I love that. As you're saying that, I'm smiling because I went to USC, and when I got to USC, there was a different level of what money is. I grew up thinking I was rich, and I thought we were the richest people in the world because if my friends came over, we would buy pizza for everybody. If we were hanging out, come to the Kelfer's house. We got snacks. It was the place, and I had parents who were present. My dad never missed a sporting event, a basketball game from the time I was 5 till my final game, senior night. In high school, and I think that there is this idea of what you think you actually want compared to what actually is going to make you happy in the life you were given.
Yep.
And we often misunderstand the difference, and we often chase the first early on because we think that that is what will bring the answer to the second part of that question, right? But we have no frame of reference because we don't know what it's like to be on the other side of whatever we're comparing ourselves to.
Right. You're right. You know, I think when I look back on my journey, I think the two moments I'm most proud of are the two promotions I turned down.
Mm,
Right. Because I didn't want to work 24 more hours a week. I didn't want to, it wasn't worth it for a company car and a corner office. I was like, no, this is ridiculous. But we just feel like we got to climb, 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 even though that might not be our path. Right. So I implore people, man, figure we get one shot at this deal, right? You better be doing something that lights you up, or you're wasting
yeah.
your.
I love it. I want to talk a little bit about, kind of for the back end of this segment here. I want to kind of talk a little bit more about your book. All right. It was the pandemic. It was before we knew each other.
Yep.
So you speak at the NFL Combine, then you get this idea, gosh, we got to write this book. So you find your partner, you end up writing this book, and it's out. One of the things I thought was really, really cool that you did was when you were speaking, and anyone that's listening to this that has a book or that wants a book, this is one really great use case. You were speaking, and we were there. There's probably 35, 40 people in the room, very intimate group, and you asked a question, audience participation. One of the things I love when speakers do. And I raised my hand and I answered the question. And I answered the question. And what you did, I believe it was during the speech actually, you came over at the next kind of like transition. You brought the book and you set it down right on my seat, like right in front of me. Everybody in the room saw it. And what everyone did, okay, you probably didn't see this, but what everyone did was that all of their eyes were like, oh, like they were like, oh shit. Like just because you volunteered, a book ended up there. And a book, it's just a book, right? Like, but there's meaning to it. Me as the receiver was like, that's a class act. Everybody else was like, oh, maybe I should participate now. What could I win? What could I do? The attention then becomes even more focused. I thought that was a brilliant thing that you did. And it's so easy, but it was a brilliant thing that you did. So how have you used the book since you've had it? And what are some areas that you want to be able to leverage the book for more in the future?
Yeah, I think we're again a myriad of ways. Like you said, the first one, rewarding people that have the bravery to ask to answer a question, and because our presentation is only as good as the people that participate in it. And if I have a
Yep.
room that's dead silent, I'm in big trouble. So we reward people like you that have the bravery to put your hand up and be part of it. I think another thing that and the thing is, when you do that in the middle of a presentation, now there's 32 books. 32 people in that room that didn't get the book that now want the book because someone else has the book, and it's an
Yep.
easy way to sell books. I think the book has given us huge leverage if we're in negotiations. So if we're close on a keynote price and they're waffling or going back and forth, it's really easy to be like, you know what? How about we land on this number and I'll throw in 50 books because I know what I have in the books. And so it actually becomes a bargaining tool, and people are, they see what the value is and like, oh, wow, that's a great deal. I'm coming it in. And then, like I said, like at the start, a book makes you an expert in this country. It just does. People just
Yeah.
assign you with that, regardless of what the content of the book is. Yeah, so I was terrified, and I remember going home and asking my wife, I'm like, hey, I'm thinking of spending this much on writing a book. And she was she was all for it. And I think I had more self-doubt, but one of the best things I ever did, just as far as moving the needle for my business.
Yeah, I love what you said about the bargaining chip. So I want to give people like an actual math example here. We don't need to use your real numbers. I'll kind of just make up some numbers here. But like, let's just say your speaking fee is $10,000, right? And let's say they're at 8, right? But this is a huge organization. There's hundreds of people in attendance. Well, depending on the price of your book, let's call it $15. If there's 200 people in attendance and you say, well, look, I know you can't get to my fee, my actual speaking fee, but what if we had a separate budget for the books and you bought 200 at 15 bucks? A lot of people can pull money from other avenues versus just speaker's fee. So now they give you 8,000, but then they buy 200 copies of $15 books. That's an extra 3 grand. So now you've actually made more than your initial speaker fee, right? Like this is the game that is to be played. And now you also have 200 people who now have your book, who can refer you, who can then hire you, who can do X, Y, Z more. And then it becomes a ripple effect. And then you're like, holy shit, what just happened? Right?
You're
This
right.
is fun. But that's a great example of how you can use your book and really use it in negotiations when being a keynote speaker. Do you like to when you're doing keynotes, do you typically when you're negotiating on a keynote price, do you add the books in as a additional thing, or do you include them in your actual keynote fee?
No, so the keynote fee stands by itself. And I
Great.
really don't bring the book up, and I really kind of wait to see how the negotiation goes. Okay. So if we land on the number,
Yep.
that's great. Oh, and by the way, we have a book. Would we be able to sell those? Is what I always ask. And a lot of times it's like, oh, you have a book? No, we'll
Yep.
buy. You know what I mean? So now you get your keynote, and where they're included is like you said, when you stall and it's like, hey, we're close, but I really want to make this happen. let's include 200 books, or I'll do your fee, but you buy 200 books. And honestly, Jake, doing that, I think we had the whole book process paid for within the year. Because the thing is
Huge.
it's just the way that it negotiated itself out. It gave us way more leverage than I ever would have thought. I never thought of that before writing the book. But man, it sure has worked for us.
You mentioned the books, one of the greatest things you've ever done for the growth of the business. Who do you think you've evolved into through the process of writing the book and using the book as part of the work that you do now?
Um, I think I've evolved into someone who implores people to do the same. You know what I mean? And I've evolved into someone that's like, um, yeah, just a cheerleader for people that have everyone that I've met since. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, I'll invest in it. If you don't believe in yourself enough, I'll invest in you, but I'm going to get half of whatever you make on the book because, like I said, I saw I saw what it did for us, right? And again, there's a ton of apprehension on our part, a ton of fear. Um, and look, we didn't have a marketing company. It was just us writing a book. And I remember when it came out, I wrote in 50 of them and sent it out to 50 people that had affected my life, and just said thank you. We're an aggregate of all the wonderful people we meet. And then you start sending it out, and you start getting it goes for sale, and you're a month in, and you've moved less than 100 books, and it's humbling, right? Like, it's super humbling. You're like, oh my gosh. And I think we just sold 9,000 copy of 12 Second Culture. So like what I would warn people is, don't just think it's, hey, you're on the national bestseller like the next day. Like, it's going to take some work on your part. But the thing is it's just built and built and built. And I think one of the things I'm the most proud of is a couple years ago, during the NHL played the Stanley Cup playoffs in the bubble, and they asked the head coach of the Colorado Avalanche, who's an avid reader. They said, hey, we know you're an avid reader. What books are you taking into the bubble? And one of the books was 12 Second Culture,
Let's
which
go.
was super cool, right? Like, it was pinch yourself moment, but it was awesome.
I think, to kind of sum everything up, man, like I think when you are willing to be lit up by something, the opportunities on the other side of taking the chance on yourself are limitless. I remember I went out after the Lakers. I released my first book at 23 years old. It was a career development book. I had 1 year of career experience, and I wrote a career development book. But within a year, I'm speaking to colleges across the country. My book's being used in college syllabus, and I'm like, what the hell? Then I'm like, let's go build a basketball combine. So I went out and I was like, let's build a secondary draft combine that complements the NBA. We can be a testing ground. We can get guys who are overlooked and give them this chance. And I'll never forget, I started doing that event. Okay, I'm 24 years old. I'm using it as a way to network with all the NBA executives. And this is everything that you're talking about here, is you got to be willing to step into it, right? And I'll never forget, I get a call, and it's an unknown number from like Louisville at the time or something. I'm like, I don't know who this is. I let it go to voicemail, and I pick it up, and it was Coach Pitino on the phone. And he's like, hey, Jake, heard you got this combine going on, would love to chat with you. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, this is unreal. I'm a 24-year-old hustling kid trying to put this combine together. And all of a sudden I got Coach Pitino on speed dial, right? Yeah. I'm like, this is insane. But none of the things that we're talking about happen if you're not willing to put in the work, if you're not willing to keep going, if you're not willing to find something that you allow yourself to give your best to, right? And I think that, when I think of what you stand for and how you've been able to build so many things, man, I just got to tip my cap to you, because that's what it's all about, right? And so as we kind of get ready to wrap up here, before we get, how to connect and buy the book, if there was anything that you would tell people, okay? I think this is a Tim Ferriss question now that I think about it, but I'm going to ask it. If there was anything, and I think Tim Ferriss goes, if there was a billboard that you could write anything you want in the world on it. And we were talking about Times Square billboards and getting books featured up there. But yeah, if there was a Times Square billboard that you could put one line or one phrase on for the entire world to see, what would it be?
Prove people right.
Prove people right.
That was the easy one for me. Prove people
Come
right.
on. Man, that was easy. And it's a good one. It's a good one. So Shaun, like, talk to us here. How do we buy the book? How do we support you? How do we get to know you? How do we continue to learn from you and be in your greatness?
Yeah. So thank you again. Like I said, always humbled to do stuff like this. But you can find the book at 12secondculturebook.com. You can go on through the website also, which is DECK, DECK, which stands for Diversity, Efficiency, Culture, and Kindness. DECKleadership.com. I'm on LinkedIn at Shaun Peet. I'm not a huge social guy, so do a lot of work in my wife's flower garden. So if you want to see flowers, it's probably not what you're expecting. But no, you can look up Trackhouse Racing. We also curate probably the best team building event in the country. And yeah, just like I said, am passionate about this work. So if there's anything I can ever do to move the needle, man, I'm in. So again, thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you for being here. So, guys, make sure to go grab the book, 12 Second Culture. You can check out Shaun on LinkedIn. It's Shaun, Shaun Peet, Peet. Make sure to go check him out. And here's my challenge to you. As we wrap up, you guys, you know, every episode we finish with a challenge. The challenge is very, very straightforward today. It's who can you prove right tonight? Who can you prove right tomorrow morning? Whenever you're listening to this, who is a person that you can prove right? Let us know how it goes for you. You deserve it. You earned it. Let's make some shit happen. Shaun, this was an absolute pleasure.
Awesome, brother. Thanks so much.
Cool. Thank you guys. Talk to you on the next one.